Hey, it's Warren Sprouse here on the Bible Forum. We're here every Sunday night. Love for you to join us here live. But if you're just watching on video, that's good. Let me know. Write to me, email me. Let me know you're out there. Go to the Facebook page. Like the Bible Forum Facebook. We're going to start streaming from there as soon as I can figure out how to do it. We're being told that on September 23rd of this year, 2017, an unprecedented astronomical alignment will appear in the sky over Israel that some researchers believe will be the literal fulfillment of Revelation chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, and Revelation chapter 12 and verse 5. Now, none of these people are Bible scholars, clearly, nor have they read the text, meaning the book of the Revelation, nor do they know anything about eschatology, a basic Bible doctrine, a doctrine you can learn at the Bible Institute of Charleston.org. But I digress. The passage in Revelation chapter 12 describes a heavenly sign where a pregnant woman appears covered in the sun, with the moon at her feet and crowned with 12 stars. The woman gives birth to a male child who is caught up to God. For centuries, many had thought this was a form of allegorical symbolism, but today, some researchers believe that it's more than just symbolism. Now comes a lengthy effort they go through to prove the point. The writer, I believe, is honest, telling us that not all Christian researchers are in support. Why? Well, because it's too close to simply studying the stars. Astrology? The lengthy effort is to get you to see that not all stargazing is astrology. So here's the thinking. The great sign, he says, is a 4-part report created by someone called Cade Hawkins, who's director of Prophecy News Watch. I don't know anything about the organization at all. He begins by explaining how that, historically, astrology surfaced around the time of the great kingdom of Chaldea, which was eventually absorbed and assimilated into Babylonia, and since then it has become a profound component of secular society. Astrology is rejected entirely by God's Word. In fact, the Bible considers consulting the heavens for guidance as a form of sorcery. Look it up, Leviticus chapter 19 and chapter 31. God warned ancient Babylon about trusting in astrologers when he makes mockery of them in Isaiah chapter 47, saying, "You are wearied in the multitude of your counsels. Let now the astrologers and stargazers and the monthly prognosticators stand up and save you from what shall come upon you." Dripping with sarcasm. God specifically condemns those who use the heavens to predict the future, saying in Deuteronomy chapter 18, "There shall not be found among you anyone that useth divination, or is an observer of times, or an enchanter, or a witch." As a result of the idolatry of the various occultic practices, including astrology, this writer is maintaining that the tribe of Judah was enslaved and dispersed as a nation. I got to tell you, nothing so far has rung a bell with me. Israel's involvement in astrology and the worship of heavenly bodies was described by many in the Old Testament prophets, including Jeremiah, Zephaniah, and Amos, all of them describing how this was displeasing to the Lord and that his judgment was the result of these practices. So how does this relate to this great sign in Revelation 12? Well, because the theology behind Revelation 12 sign is based on what is euphemistically called the gospel of the stars. This author is leaning heavily on the gospel of the stars. It's based on the premise that God uses his creation, notably the heavens, to convey the message of the gospel. The understanding is that there's a period in time before Moses when there was no written word, so God used stars along with oral tradition as the means by which to communicate fundamental truths to the likes of Abraham, Job, Enoch, Seth, other patriarchs of old. Most people today have grown up with the names of the 12 signs of the zodiac, somehow as their only education on the naming of stars and constellations. In reality, the names remain the same today as they were in those ancient cultures even before the flood. In fact, each name carries a meaning that when put together in the constellation tells a story. In Job chapter 38, verse 31, we read, "Can you blind the sweet influences of Pleiades, or loose the bands of Orion? Can you bring forth Mazzaroth in his season, or can you guide Arcturus with his sons? Do you know the ordinance of heaven? Can you see the dominion thereof in the earth?" Did you note the words Orion, Pleiades, Arcturus? These were all names of clusters of stars found in the zodiac. What about the word Mazzaroth? That one's not really familiar. But Mazzaroth is actually the Hebrew name for the zodiac. Hebrew history shows that Mazzaroth has nothing to do with astrology or any attempt to tell our futures based on the stars. Rather, Mazzaroth was a Hebrew mode of communication that used the stars to tell the story of redemption. So here's the dilemma. On one hand, we have a Bible forbidding us against astrology, yet on the other hand, a Bible that tells us we need to be watchful of the signs and observe the signs in the heavens for confirmation of the coming of Christ. That's a paradox. But it's a paradox that has puzzled researchers for a very long time, according to this author. According to the Word of God, we're not looking to the heavens for signs, we're looking to the heavens for the coming of Christ. Not a star, the person. That's it. Professor Emeritus of Science at Westmont College, his name Peter Stoner, has calculated the probability of one man fulfilling the major prophecies made concerning the Messiah. His estimates were worked out by 12 different classes representing some 600 university students. The students carefully weighed all the factors discussed in each of the prophecies at some length, and then examined the various circumstances which might indicate that men had conspired together to fulfill a particular prophecy. What did they learn? They learned that it would take one chance out of 1,017 opportunities. That's one followed by 17 zeros for a single person to fulfill all of these, meaning there is no way that this would be any form of fabrication, with Jesus somehow fulfilling an Old Testament prophecy made before even he was born. The same logic applies to the great sign and the set of alignments which are going to take place in September. There just seems nothing close to this would be called a coincidence, given the fact that the alignments are visible only from Israel. But here's how it's supposed to all work out. On the Hebrew day of Tishri 1, which falls from sunset September 22nd until sunset September 23rd this year, 2017, the sun will be within the zodiac constellation of Virgo, a woman clothed with the sun. The moon will be at the feet of Virgo, with the moon under her feet. The 9 stars of the zodiac constellation, Leo plus 3 planets, Mercury, Venus, Mars, will be at the head of Virgo. And as the passage describes, on her head a crown of 12 stars. The planet Jupiter will be in the center of Virgo, and as the weeks pass after September 23rd, Jupiter will exit Virgo after being within the vicinity for 9 months, passing to the east, past her feet, so to speak. She was with child and wailed aloud in pain as she labored to give birth. Jupiter is the largest of the planets, the king of the planets, as it were. And the prophecy says she gave birth to a son, a male child, destined to rule all the nations with an iron rod. Meaning, who knows? It could mean the coming of Christ. So mark your calendar. Be ready, I suppose. The reality is that Revelation 12 occurs in the middle of the Great Tribulation. That's after the 7th trumpet judgment and very near the end of the whole event. Revelation 12, verse 18, and the nations were angry, and God's wrath is come, and the time of the dead that they should be judged, and that thou shouldst give reward unto thy servants, the prophets, and to the saints, and to them that fear thy name, small and great, and should destroy them which destroy the earth. In chapter 13 it says, and there appeared another wonder in heaven, and behold, a great red dragon, Satan, having 7 heads, 10 horns, 7 crowns upon his heads. And his tail drew a third part of the stars of heaven, and cast them to the earth. The dragon stood before the woman, which was ready to be delivered, for to devour her child as soon as it was born. Presumably, when Isaiah says a third of the angels fell with Lucifer, he did not mean they left the heavenlies, or the heavens, or the heavenly realm necessarily, but they're still there. The issue is, what about those consigned and chained in hell because they are too vile? What are they all about? In verse 5 it says, she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all the nations with a rod of iron, and her child was caught up unto God and to his throne. We're talking Jesus here. But here the narrative switches back to the present time. Verse 6, and the woman, believing Israel in the end times, fled into the wilderness, where she hath a place prepared of God, that she should feed her, that they should feed her there for 1,260 days. That's half of that 7-year period. And there was war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. The dragon fought his angels and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world. He was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. John says, I heard a loud voice saying in heaven, now is come salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ, for the accuser of the brethren is cast down, which accused them before our God day and night. You want to know where Satan spends most of his time? So the problem with Professor Stoner's hypothesis is that it doesn't fit the biblical narrative. Kind of a sticky wicket for me, but apparently not that much for him. We've looked at Joel Richardson's work, several books on the subject, found subtle differences that don't seem to match up, but this one seems to be completely off base, and you have to wonder at his hermeneutic. A hermeneutic is how you interpret the words on a page. You can get that from the Bible Institute of Charleston.org as well. It's one of the basic 10 doctrines. When all this happens, the Bible is clear. We, believing Christians, the bride of Christ, won't be here. We're coming with him from heaven at the end of the Great Tribulation. And too much has to happen before September 17 for this to be anything but an intellectual exercise, because the Great Tribulation is 7 years long. But it is an intellectual exercise. I just don't think it's that great a one. Don't be deceived.